Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to the Talent Talks, an initiative by the Talent Tribe, a P2P learning community for talent management professionals. Now, we have a very special session lined up today, and with two very special guests. We have Rajaraman and Lavanya today with us. Rajaraman is the co-founder and COO at Chargebee, and Lavanya is the director of ops at Chargebee. She looks after strategic programs like OKRs, etc., within the organization. Now, I've had the pleasure of interacting with Rajaraman over the past few months, maybe more than a year or so. And one thing which has always stood out for me is the supreme focus which Chargebee puts on its people practices and the amount of effort which goes into designing those people practices. So just to give you an example, like when Chargebee was designing their annual appraisal system, they were just not ready with a 5-point rating scale because they felt that a 5-point rating scale always looks at the individual's past instead of focusing on the individual's potential to perform in the future. And the thought behind that, which Rajaraman put very succinctly, and I still kind of remember to this day, was that when we are hiring, we are actually hiring people for potential to perform in the next 1 year or so, based on a few small conversations or short conversations. Whereas when we are discussing performance, we are always looking at the individual's past performance and not at the individual's potential to perform in the future. So, with this profound thought, let me welcome Rajaraman and Lavanya again to the Talent Talks. It's a pleasure to have you here, Rajaraman.
Thank you, Yash, for the brief note. And hey, everyone, this is Rajaraman, one of the co-founders and COO at Chargebee. I began my career as a developer at Zoho right after the college and spent a decade there building various products. That's where I learned the craft of building products and writing code and putting the product into the hands of the customer. 2011 started Chargebee with Krish, with whom I went to college way back in '97, and a couple of other co-founders from my Zoho days. In the early 2010, 2011, we were working on a lot of SaaS products, and we believe that SaaS is the next wave that we need to ride on top of. So we were not very particular about picking a problem. We wanted to just come together as a team and build an organization, and problem was secondary. So we just picked the revenue management and subscription billing as a problem to focus on, or around which we can build the organization. That's how it got started, and a lot of struggles in the initial years leading up to finding the right product market fit and everything. But fortunately, the market had been kind with us, and things have been going well. But we are still in the very early stages and a lot to learn, a lot of work to do. That's a quick introduction about Chargebee. And as for me, I spent the first 5 years of my career at Chargebee writing code and building product, and then shifted completely to operations, leading sales, marketing, pre-sales, and other teams. And now I'm getting back to close to be with engineering, having hired the CXOs for across all these functions. That's a quick background about me. Over to you, Lavanya.
Thanks, Rajaraman. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here this afternoon. Hi, Yash. So I started out my career as a programmer as well, almost 20 years ago. Spent quite a bit of time, started out in public retirement, but moved across multiple domains, was in the mobile space for a while when it took off. And now here I am in B2B SaaS. Predominantly spent a lot of time in engineering and product, but in Chargebee made a pivot to be on the business side of things. I work closely with Rajaraman. I focus on operational excellence and a lot of org systems. It's a wonderful journey because there's so much to learn every day. I mean, we can constantly keep getting better. So that would be, what I take to work every day.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rajaraman and Lavanya. Now, I think it's about time we start going a bit deeper into the performance management system inside Chargebee. Now, but before we do that, just basically wanted to start with the context. Like in what context do we design these systems? Because that probably is the most important part. Every organization has a different context. So what is your operating philosophy when it comes to performance management? What do you want to achieve out of that? Is it performance? Is it, let's say, development? Is it to take compensation decisions or like something else?
Definitely, yes. I think, like I quickly mentioned, right? So we wanted to build an organization because we wanted to go through the journey of what does it take to build a product-driven organization. That was the core thing, and of that, definitely the people is a core part, especially given the SaaS and tech organization. People is the only biggest asset with which you build the entire organization and the product and everything, that value that you create to the customers, right? And also, we wanted to also hold ourselves in high standards, like, hey, how can we get people to do the career's best work at Chargebee? And whenever they leave Chargebee, can they have an important part in the resume that, hey, their experience at Chargebee as an important one? So we always dreamt of how can we really build people around that career option is something that we are deeply cared about. So one of the important thing, personally, as a personal growth for me and Krisha and KPS and everybody, in 2011, when we got started, there was not a lot of many startups in Chennai, and we were building a B2B, especially closer to the payment space. Only place that we could acquire revenue is from selling to US and Europe and not in India, right? How do we really learn to build an organization by sitting here in Chennai and then at the same time selling to the customers in Europe and US? The only way we acquired the knowledge and everything is by talking to a lot of people. So one thing that we learned in the first 3 to 5 years is like the only way we can all get better is by learning and figuring out our own framework of how do we really continuously learn, because someone else is always doing a better job and someone else is always discovering something. How can we build your network to do learn that, right? So books and talking to a lot of people and how others are solving the problem, instead of trying to solve everything from first principle approach, trying to solve it by yourself is something that we learned to break away from. Of course, right, we did our own fair amount of mistakes to get that, but the core tenet had became continuous learning culture. So a few years ago, we didn't do the value, what are the Chargebee values exercise for a long time. We did it like after 4 to 5 years of our journey into building the organization. The way we did it was we gathered people together who had spent a lot of time in Chargebee and have them identify what are the values that you see in people, you see in the way we work with customers, the way we work with our partners and everything. And we bubbled up the four key tenets as one is curiosity. What we see as curiosity is, are people willing to learn continuously and have an open mind, rather than being know-it-all, are they learn-it-all, right? So that's extremely became an important tenet. And second one is customer centricity. Not that in the context of customer service, but learning to operate from the shoes of customers. And then the next one is definitely the empathy. How do we really understand and empathize with the various situations that every other person go through? Will you be able to experience other people's experience is extremely important. That's what we call as empathy. And finally, keeping with customer centricity, curiosity, and empathy, do you have the bias for action? This is something that when we formulated this ideas, the story that we told ourselves is we didn't have that value. We wanted to add one aspiration value, which we can actually change by striking a balance on the other key three values is how we acquired the bias for action. Still, a lot of work is going on in our values. Not that other values are not important, but these are the values that within the organization we celebrate profusely. And we were late to formulate these journey. One of the recommendation I keep giving to other startups is any opportunity that they see to do it much, much early when they are less than 20, less than 30. It is always easy for the next set of people who come and join the company to latch on to that. Otherwise, you have to do a lot of driving across the organization top down to break down the inertia to become a standard way of working around these values. Right? We did a lot of work for close to 12 to 18 months to run a lot of town halls, a lot of AMAs, a lot of weekly celebrations, a lot of nudges to celebrate the values demonstrated by a lot of people. Now, these have become a part of interviews and everything. If I go and check some interview notes, people would write about how the specific candidate exhibit these values from the interview. So, but they did a lot of work to get to that stage. But earlier you do when you are small, gets easier to make it as part of the everyday working of the organization.
Right. I mean, that's a great insight, Rajaraman. Thanks a lot for that. So, in this context, maybe I can ask Lavanya this question. If you can help us define the performance management system within Chargebee, like what are the constituents? What does the process look like? What are the various steps, etc., which you define as part of the performance system within Chargebee? So, that'll be really great to start with.
Sure. Ash. So I think when we look at performance, right? So we look at it from a team perspective and an individual perspective, right? Team performance. Now we've been in the OKR. We've adopted OKRs, and we are in the OKR journey for about close to 2 years now. And so that is our team big rock goal mechanism, which drives team performance. Now, of course, every team has its own KPIs, which is the other mechanism that drives performance at the team level. For individuals, what we did is we liked the OKR framework and its emphasis on focus and big rocks. So we did our own evolution of the OKR framework for individuals, which is still evolving, what we call the individual OKRs or the IOKRs. Now, those also bring in learning and development and value components into setting goals at the individual level. So these are the various components of the performance management system. When we talk about the cycle right now, so these are the parts, but how do we then use them? We have an annual performance rating, review conversation and a rating cycle. But the quarterly cycles are review conversations because our goal setting is also quarterly at the function and the team level. So the goal setting conversations happen quarterly, and therefore the review conversations happen quarterly as well. And I can perhaps go into the OKR cycle a bit later when we touch upon OKRs, later in the conversation. But review and feedback mechanisms are also part of our one-on-one conversations, which happen weekly, bi-weekly in teams. So performance review, while the formal is more annual and quarterly in nature, organically, I think a lot of it flows in a continuous manner.
Got it. But and how about recognition? Rajaraman, would you want to add a thing about recognition here? Because I think that's also one of the important aspects we've seen organizations use to drive performance.
Yeah, 100%. I think before that, I just want to quickly touch upon that performance philosophy also, right? So, for example, we always, of course, right, our system evolved over a period of time. Not everything was clear for us from day one, and we made a fair amount of mistakes to figure things out over a period of time. I think we strongly believe in what Ben Horowitz said in Hard Things About Hard Things, and you hire for strengths and not for weaknesses. It's extremely important. It would rather you would spend all your time and energy for someone to build on their strengths rather than trying to improve on their weaknesses. While Ben mentioned this in the context of leadership hiring, over the period we realized that it has to be the standard set of your playbook in terms of hiring anybody, and knowing someone's weaknesses is good, not to assess, but rather knowing where to fill the gaps or how to assess the people instead of seeing it through the lens of the performance review is something that we advocate a lot when it comes to doing a performance appraisal and everything. That's why we force people to write down what is it that you look, and we also ask people to write down what is it that you don't have clarity about how the other person is thinking about. These are extremely important nuances as part of putting a system in place. The how matters a lot. These things we try to capture these things via our recommendation on how you can actually think about the performance and how you should look at people and everything. Ultimately, we all know, right? So there's a concept of transferable and non-transferable skills. Passion is a non-transferable skill. You can't just get people to motivate one fine day and then become driven, right? You have to find naturally people who are passionate about it, are driven about the problem that they are thinking. Where you can always teach someone how to write better emails, how to learn to code in specific programming language, or learning specific microservices, or learning new sales methodology. All of things are possible with the right programs in place. Learning to differentiate between what is transferable and what is non-transferable is extremely important in performance to really value that person. Ultimately, if you don't value that person, the problem is you are not going to give them an important problem for them to advance their career. So it's just a mutual one. So I just wanted to make that comment quickly. Of course, we are going to keep coming back to this philosophy in various areas as we spend more time. When it comes to recognition, we don't advocate a standard way of recognition across the organization. We let the teams drive it according to what they feel is the right way and best way for them. But across the Chargebee, one thing that we have rolled out a program called rewards program using a platform called Bonusly. What we do is we allow people to celebrate how somebody helped them to become successful in a specific activity or specific deal or specific issue that they are struggling with, where somebody came in and helped. So it is extremely important for somebody to celebrate others, help them in becoming a success is one thing that we do. This is a tool called Bonusly, where I can give rewards to others or others can give rewards to you. And every month when it starts, you are given a certain number of points which you can award. They can reimburse those awards into anything that they wish to. So that is one thing. And then there are, for example, sales runs a program called President Club, where they track the achievement of certain people based on the outcomes all through the year, and then have a recognition program the next year. But they announce what is the program is all about, what are we going to do. Every year has a different theme. So people have, and we also have certain types of spot bonuses. It could be cash, or it could be ESOPs, it could be anything. But what is more important is how do we encourage the culture of people recognizing each other, not just that need not be anything that is tangible that's given. Even a simple, we created a Slack channel like 6 years ago, a wall of love, where people just celebrate others' help in getting something done together as a team, right, within the team. And it enables a lot of cross collaboration and everything. These are the ways that we drive recognition, but there is no prescribed way, this is how it has to be done. But we encourage everybody to build a program that they believe on that program, rather than, hey, employee of the month and everything, which we don't really believe, but rather let the teams to build a recognition program that they are deeply have a lot of conviction about, is a philosophy that we have adopted here, Yash.
Got it. So we are saying that it is primarily decentralized, the recognition.
That's right. Yeah, decentralized. Yeah, a lot of things are decentralized. Even leave policies are decentralized. While we have open leave policy, we let the teams decide how do they want to structure the leave, is something that we have adopted. It comes from the philosophy of there is no policy, there are only guidelines, and people are smart enough to define around those guidelines what is right for their team without creating any impact to the organization, is the philosophy that we have adopted. Yeah.
This is super interesting because at Super Beings also we follow this policy around leaves. We let people choose their own leaves. But what is interesting is how do you manage that at the scale which Chargebee is at right now? We will probably cross that bridge when we get there. But super interesting to know that you are doing it at that scale. Rajaraman, like we briefly touched about strengths-based management, and that's something which is becoming an important paradigm today in the world of work, right? So, could you touch a bit more around that? How do we integrate that into the performance practices? Like, how does that flow into feedback? How does that flow into recognition? How does that flow into, let's say, reviews, etc.? Or is there a way to drive that strengths-based management culture within the organization?
Okay, so is it on the feedback and everything, right? So definitely few things, right? So most of, like I mentioned, most of these things are evolved. Whatever I say now is just a point in time what's happened. That's a lot of background. Happy to go into the details based on the questions that is relevant to the early stages and everything. For Chargebee, for most part of for the first 6 years, it was predominantly founder-led. Krish being the CEO, and I'm still the COO, running the operations and everything. And KPS, the CTO, was driving the engineering. Right? We connect often, created the culture of weekly connect among the founders outside of what we interact on the context of work, right? Customer issues and everything. We also carve out our own time, what is important for the organization. We got that into the habit. And we knew that in the beginning that this is not something that is scalable. One of the important turnkey moment personally for me is finding value in writing and then capturing notes from every conversation that you have been to, right? Be it an interview, be it a random person that you are meeting, be it an one-on-one and everything. So most important thing in everything is the culture of writing. How do you really learn as an organization to drive things in writing? Because when you say something, yes, it is being listened by other person, but nobody knows what is being done with that, right? How does it get translated into action item and everything? So how do we build the culture of writing things down and then keeping that as a frame of reference to anchor the conversation and then the action plan is an important turnkey moment personally for me in my own journey as a founder. And we have started encouraging this across the organization. For example, for the past 4-5 years, every feedback that we have given to others, we're all in writing. And sometimes it is annual, sometimes it is biannual, sometimes it is quarterly. But one commitment that we have made to ourselves is every feedback that we give is written down and handed it over so that it becomes a frame of reference. Next time when we give feedback, we give it on top of that, right? So that is the one practice that we as a founders really beginning to adopt it. And then, for example, funny, every time we give written feedback to RU or CHRO, he shares the same feedback in verbatim written down to the entire team, his entire team. Right? It creates a culture of the value of written down feedback, and always it's something that's referenceable for everybody. And check, hey, how have I done against this feedback that I have received? It gets easy for all of us to really consume and then do it. And also the other one is a 360-degree feedback. We did once or twice collecting the 360-degree feedback. And some of the behavioral feedback that you get don't really change often, but you will see a pattern repeated over a period of time. So it's a good mirror that you others show to you. Hey, these are the areas that you possibly struggle and everything. So first and foremost, how do we learn to give feedback in writing? That forces you to have a certain vocabulary and way of communicating that feedback. Right? Emphasizing importance in that is extremely important. And of course, right, so that it is important that people adopt a certain framework to communicate. There are a lot of frameworks out there in the internet and everything that allows you to communicate the feedback in a way that it feels constructive to the other person, so that they are openly receiving that feedback is extremely important. And second one is encouraging people to share feedback directly instead of going through the manager's manager. If Lavanya has a problem with another director in another team in sales or marketing, so we have taken a stance that, hey, between you both, that feedback has to be exchanged instead of it's coming through me to their manager and then it goes. By the time it goes there, it gets diluted and nobody has a ownership of closing a loop on that feedback. So emphasizing a lot on the culture of writing the feedback and capturing it in some sort of a system. At early days, we didn't really emphasize it has to be captured in specific performance management system. A simple Google Docs or a project management is good enough. But over a period of time, it transformed into capturing these notes in the performance management systems, and HRIS and everything has evolved over a period of time. But this is how we learned. But I would encourage us definitely writing down the feedback and sharing it has lots and lots of value. Once you got into the habit, also learning to be more specific in the feedback that you write so that people can really relate instead of generalized feedback, hey, you are always late, right? Instead of you're always late, how can we tell, hey, this is the thing. So one of the feedback I often got from early days is, hey, I say too many yes than no, right? That let me really absorb, reflect, and go back to them. What are the instances? And I said yes instead of I said no, and everything. It helped me to really form my own action item towards that feedback. So how can we be specific to here so that people can relate it to how they can change? This is extremely important. And finally, these habits will also help us get into the place where sharing feedback in time instead of gathering it over a quarter or a year. So how do we get into the habit of sharing the feedback in one-on-one? Say, this is what I noticed. Probably it is for you to take a closer look and then adapt yourself. I think gradually getting it here, this is how it happened. But of course, over a period of time, yes.
Yeah, so this is actually mostly real-time feedback than waiting for a specific time to share some feedback.
Exactly.
Awesome. So let's move on quickly, Rajaraman, on the first aspect maybe of driving performance, which is like planning performance through goals, right? So I'll get to Lavanya also, where we talk about the goal system being used within the organization. But before we get there, like with every other topic which we are covering, just wanted to understand the context behind the goal system which was chosen and why it was chosen.
Super. We did not have a goal system for long, but in the last 3 years, we have adapted the OKRs as a goal system. Lavanya, her function is driving the OKRs across the organization, across all our GOs. But I'll just quickly cover the top aspects, some of the things that the way we designed this, right? Definitely, we have learned over a period of time. Even recently, I was listening to this podcast by Franz Lutman, the CEO of Snowflake. How do we ensure that we focus fewer things and go deep into this focus? One of the things that we wanted to bring focus is, hey, how do we as an organization use the goal systems to communicate what are the top items for the organization, right? That is first and foremost, learning to communicate and build the habit of reinforcing in people's mind that, hey, these are the top priorities, not that other things are not priority, but hey, if we fail on these top priorities as an organization, our odds of becoming success is coming down. So it is extremely important that everybody contribute to the success of these top priorities. Goal system is a tool for us to communicate that. That's how we got started. For example, one of the important aspects that we had in the last year and previous years is learning to go up market, right? One of the important things to go up market is how do we learn as an organization to acquire 100K ACV deals, right? So instead of having overarching revenue goals, how can we have a specific goal saying that, hey, can we have at least 2,500K deals closed in this year? That will help us mark ourselves that, hey, we are going up market, right? Very similar to that, this year it is more about, we have acquired some companies that towards the end of last year, the multiple product, learning the muscle of being a multi-product company so that we acquire revenue from direct sales motion, cross-sell and upsell across these multi-product is an important goal. So everybody in every organization is thinking about how am I going to enable the multi-product motion all the way from sales to implementation, support, and product building. So this is how we have designed the goal system. When we think about the goal system, these are the aspects that we think about. I'll let Lavanya to continue on laying the foundation for the tracking the goal system and everything.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Rajan. Yeah. Lavanya, just over to you. We'd just love to understand about the goal system at Chargebee. What is the system in use? What frequency do we set the goals? Who's responsible for setting the goals? And a lot of the other aspects around goal setting, I think that'll be super interesting for us to know.
Sure. I think I'll pick up from where Rajaraman left, right? It's the goal system is a mechanism to clearly communicate what we're focusing on. So driving that clarity, and it's a communication mechanism if you think about it, right? So even when we brought in the OKR framework, I think the goal was, what are we focusing on? So narrow down the focus, be very clear about it, but communicate it, right? Looking at it as a communications framework and making it visible to the whole organization. Now, like Rajaraman said, Earlier, teams used to set their own goals, except these were not visible in a single place. These were more conversational, right? Like I would talk to another leader, I would understand what they're prioritizing, I would share mine, but it was all, it was conversational and organic. But then we were growing, and there was a point where making it visible became really important so that people can then figure out how to align and prioritize. So we started building the habit. Before we got to OKRs, we said, let's do something where this habit of quarterly goal setting becomes a habit for all of us. And the habit of making it visible to everybody in the organization becomes a habit for all of us. So we started with something called the commits, right? We said quarterly commits. So list down your commits, keep them focused. And then we made it visible to everybody. Very simple. We put it on sheets and just made it visible. And we started doing it for a couple of quarters. So people got into the habit of, at the end of a quarter, I'm going to think about what my priorities are. I'm going to put it on the sheet and make it visible. And with gentle nudges, people were, putting it out there and checking other people's commits and getting a good understanding of, hey, marketing is doing this and I'm looking at something else. So maybe this is an area where I need to add value. So let me just have a conversation and prioritize it appropriately. So we slowly started introducing those kinds of conversations and habits at the beginning of the quarter. That set the stage for looking at OKRs. And because OKRs, they kept it simple and the focus was on the big rocks and on measurable outcomes, that was something that we've been talking about for a while inside the organization. And then we thought, let's try it out. We started out with 1 or 2 teams for a quarter, but then we slowly rolled it out to the organization. Kept it simple because, you hear a lot about how, OKRs go to a certain extent, but then maybe you can't carry it forward. So we wanted to keep it simple, understand what's applicable for our context, and then slowly extend it. So that's the backstory. Today, when we look at OKRs, we do it at 3 levels, right? At the beginning of the year, so we typically start this exercise around the October, November, the Krish, the execs, there are a lot of conversations, and there is a lot of importance given to asking questions and crafting what then becomes the company OKRs for a year, right? We do this at the annual level. So we craft it once a year, even though we do review it every quarter to say, hey, is this still making sense? So once that company OKR is set at the annual level and we make it visible by mid-December, people are now ready to look at that, and at a function level, say marketing, sales, product, all of us, we are now ready to look at it and say, okay, now given that this is the directional impetus for 2022, now what is going to be my quarterly priority? And then we craft our own OKRs, and function OKRs happen every quarter. So we set quarterly OKRs. We also look at where alignment is needed with other functions, because one thing we've realized is a lot of cross collaboration happens. So unless we look and have these conversations, I mean, obviously you can always keep getting better at it, but this is a way for us to open out those conversations. So we have a lot of sharing of OKRs, we discuss it, and this happens at a quarterly level. Now, when we talk about reviews, we revisit our OKRs and look at how well we're doing at the org level on a monthly basis. So Rajaraman, along with the exec team, is probably going to do a review in one of the exec meetings every month and say, hey, how are we all doing? And what is it looking like? How are we progressing? But within teams, it might be even more rigorous. And we've left it to the convenience of the teams. Depending upon what their key results are, sometimes it makes sense to do it at a weekly level. Sometimes it makes sense at bi-weekly or monthly levels, right? Okay. Now at a quarterly level, what we do is in our all hands, our CEO goes and shares progress, shares his thought on, where we are, what are areas maybe we need to correct. So we have this open presentation with the entire organization where we talk about how well we're doing and what can be done better. And this is something that happens at a quarterly level. One thing we do is continually look at it. We also have a tool, we use GTM Hub. So we look at how things align. It has a hierarchical view, and then you're able to kind of see what maps to what. Right. So at a high level, this is how it looks like, Yash. Anything specific that you'd like me to touch on?
So would love to understand about the individual levels. Like we talked about the organizational goals, functional goals, and the team goals. Maybe how does it translate to the individual goals? And like who's responsible for like coming up with the individual goals? Is it the managers who tell the individual that hey, these are your goals, or do the individuals come up with their goals? And then how do we make sure that they're aligned to the organizational goals or the functional goals, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so it's a collaborative process. This also happens at the quarterly level, right? So there's the team OKRs that are set. So the manager is able to give some level of visibility into this is the priority for the team. Then the individual also sets in their own development goals and their specific contribution goals to a team OKR. There is a specific conversation on the goal setting itself, which works in tandem with the quarterly review and expectation setting cycle. So it is a collaborative process. There are inputs from the manager, but there's also an input from the individual on, hey, this is where I think I can contribute. And we do capture it. And this is where we capture it. The IOKRs are where.
Yeah. And like one thing which I've seen is a lot of organizations struggle with having clearly defined goals for everyone in the organization. So is that something which we have like managed to do at Chargebee? Does everyone have clearly defined SMART goals, as we call them, or some of the goals are not that clearly defined as well for some people or some roles maybe?
I'll take a stab at this, Raman. You should also probably answer, right? So one of the things is we could always get better at this in terms of quantifying. It always feels like yes, maybe we can tease it out a little bit more. But we start by asking a lot of questions, Yash, in order to take a key result and make it really quantifiable. During the crafting of the objectives and the key results, the working sessions have a lot of questions. So we try and see how rigorously can we get to quantifiable outcomes. And that is what we drive for. But I mean, obviously it could be, we keep learning how to make it a lot better. Rajaraman, anything you'd like to add here?
I think I echo your thoughts, right? So one important thing, I just want to reiterate one thing that Lavanya mentioned here, Yashar, about building the habit, right? More than trying to be perfect about your goals from day one, the habit is more important. They keep telling, right, if you want to go to gym, get into the habit of waking up on time to go to the gym. That is more important. So I think we knew that based on our own reading, we knew that building a goal system in place is not an easy one. We are not going to be perfect for a good amount of time, but do we have the perseverance to adhere to it and then drive the organization and break out of the inertia is an important conscious conversation that we all had, like me, Lavanya, the other execs in creation. Everybody continue to talk about how do we really build this as a habit in the organization. So we did not emphasize a lot and demand from people that, hey, everything has to be perfect and everything. For example, first time, a lot of activities got into the OKR. Right now, we are evolved into the place where people have started thinking about the clearly articulated outcomes as an OKR, right? So I think these transition happens by doing, by not theoretically knowing this is how OKR is. So a lot of opportunity. We also brought some external agents, consultant to have some as an OKR expert. So anybody can go and have a chat with them to get some guidance on how to do it. So all of these are extremely important to build the goal setting culture within the entire team. That's extremely important. And second one is, right, so it is broadly, it's indicated that the OKR should not be used for the individual performance and everything. So it's an important one, not to pollute the OKRs. At the same time, you need some system so that people know that how they performed, right? There is one thing as performance review, but also as an individual, I should know how I'm performing. Something should be there to show me the mirror. This is how I'm performing. So instead of confusing people with KPI and KRI, we just adopted the IOKR. It could be for all practical purposes, can be called by anything for that matter, yes, right? So just wanted to ensure that OKRs stops at team level, starting from CEO, and then the IOKR starts out. It's applicable for all the individual contributors. This is how we segregated the overall OKRs. But for managers who have OKRs, we leave the manager and manager to align on how I'm going to determine your performance and everything. So we continue to let that manager to decide on how they would like to manage their one down. So these are some of the nuances that we need to do. But the point I would like to make here is, right, habit is most important thing, and knowledge about the OKR is most important thing. Without handling these two, any effort that you put in making the OKR a lot better is not gonna work out really well. So investing time for the first, it could be like 2 or 3 quarters to bringing the knowledge level of OKRs up and the habit up. The first 3 quarters is extremely instrumental. You will start seeing things stabilizing only from the 4th quarter. Willing to accept that is extremely important in this journey.
Got it. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rajaraman. So I think we'll quickly move on because we've already spoken about feedback and driving the culture of feedback earlier. I just wanted to quickly touch upon the last aspect of performance management, which is basically assessing performance, right? And that relates to what probably is the most hated practice in the whole performance management system, which is assessing your annual appraisals and reviews, right? So what is the frequency at which you do your reviews? And maybe Lavanya can take a shot at it. I just wanted to understand at what frequency do we do reviews, and what is covered, etc.
Sure. So again, we have a guideline, but some teams do it at slightly different frequencies. But at an organizational level, our formal nudges are done quarterly to capture performance reviews and notes into the HRMS system. However, a lot of teams do have notes that they capture monthly, which kind of feeds into. So the quarterly conversation is a lot simpler, and you're just feeding what you've already captured, right? So that happens at the quarterly level. And then in the annual level, what happens is the annual performance conversation is part reflection on the year that went by, but also an opportunity to frame, what are the opportunities for an individual in the upcoming year, and how can we set goals towards that. So it's a 2-part conversation. But that's also a place where we share a rating of how the individual has contributed to the organization. I think the rating, there's been some thought that we've had over the last year on there's always better ways to keep doing this. So how do we frame it? What does a rating actually mean? I think that's something we've spent quite a bit of time last year talking about.
Yeah, would love to know a bit about the rating scale, Lavanya, right? Like how and what was the thought process firstly behind debating so much about the rating scale, and finally what did you end up picking and why?
So we looked at 3-point scales, 5-point scales, and we asked if you needed a pointed scale, did ratings matter? And all of these questions, deliberated it and tried to apply it to our context and see what would be meaningful. But I think one of our key, moments was when we said, why are we talking in terms of expectations, and whose expectations are we talking about? If you're giving an individual a rating, then why not talk about the individual's contributions and rate that? And that would give them a sense of, how much more they can contribute and where they can contribute. So we changed our framing of what a performance rating would look like, and started looking at it as reflecting the contributions of an individual vis-a-vis reflecting, say, the expectations of the manager or the team. So that was the pivot we made some time ago, and now we look at a contribution-based rating.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you have it at the top of your head, but if you can educate us about the various terms which you use for the rating scale.
So it's a 4-point scale. So I'll start with the middle two, right? Typically, you have solid contributors who are really good at their job, do what's essential. The strong contributors who probably take it up a notch and go beyond the contributions of their role, but also you can see their contributions visibly in other parts of the organization and other teams. The exceptional would be the outlier on this side. Then we have a limited contributor, which is probably newer people who are trying to get their feet wet and trying to figure out how they can grow into a solid contributor. So it is limited, solid, strong, and exceptional. And the framing is to show people, where they are now and maybe where they can, feel help in order to perhaps contribute better.
Awesome. So I think a question for Rajaraman may be here. Like, what is then the outcome of this exercise? Like, where is this rating scale used? Is it used for compensation decisions, performance, like promotions, development decisions, etc.? So would love to understand that.
Definitely, yes. I think one of the things that we struggled is, if you look at the previous ratings, it was all called met expectations, exceeded expectations, did not meet expectation. It looked into the past, right? One of the things that we are learning is how every performance review is how do you learn to look at the performance review as a rehire decision, right? Would you hire this person again knowing how that person has performed? For example, somebody whom you have worked with for 3 years might not have performed in the last 6 months, right? Do you say met expectation or do you say strong contributor, right? So how do we really learn to apply the performance take the future into consideration? Because whatever the compensation, that review that you go through, you are not giving it for the work that they did in the past, the work that they are going to do it in the future. So how can we have the performance ratings also to resonate with, hey, this is about future and it's not about the past. So people take a holistic approach of, hey, if someone has a bad performance in a quarter, and if you're still excited about that person because they have continuously have done a better work, and you still strongly believe that you is a strong contributor, I think we should award them as a strong contributor and give them the rating back, right? So we wanted to bring this change into the conversation between the manager and the team member. We are far from a perfect conversation, but this is our philosophy of every performance review is a hiring decision, and how do we ensure that these and what naturally happens is when you worked with someone for a year or 6 quarters, and you know that they have a one bad quarter, what it also happens is the way you rate them is based on the strengths that they carry also, instead of the weaknesses and everything. I think these two important aspects are enabled by coining a term that is future looking, and deliberately having a conversation between the manager and team member around the performance. And we also request the manager and team member to mutually align on the performance review. What we want is there is a self-assessment piece that a team member comes in with, hey, I am a solid contributor, I am a strong contributor, an exceptional contributor. And then the manager goes into the same meeting with the standard written down feedback about his view of that person's assessment and the rating, right? We expect both of them to change, align on it. Either the team member should change, get convinced by the manager, or manager should get convinced by the team member, right? But what we expect is there is no ambiguity on the area, the rating and areas of improvement as part of the performance review. And then we decouple the entire compensation. Of course, the contributor rating plays an important role in awarding the compensation revision, but we don't have a specific any bottom 5, top 5 and all of those concepts. But what we have promised ourselves is we will refine it over a period of time instead of force-fitting a certain framework within the organization. I think these are some of the things that we are learning. And also the onus of getting this performance review done by time is put on the individuals instead of the managers, so that the individuals take ownership of blocking a time and writing it down, and ensure that the managers also writes it down and then owns the outcome for that meeting is something that we have put the onus on the individual also.
Got it. So do we communicate these final ratings to the individuals? Because then as soon as you communicate the ratings, the link between the rating and the compensation automatically gets formed within the individual's head. So how do we manage that aspect? Because we're trying to de-link here.
Yeah. So two things, right? See, compensation is a function of the market also, right? See, for example, how do we, for this role, if we have to hire from outside, what is the market pay that I have to pay is something that we consciously do a lot of exercise every year. It's been 4 years we have been doing a Mercer-based compensation benchmarking to internally understand which percentile that this person is there and everything. And you might have somebody as a solid performer, solid contributor, and still might have some issues with the compensation. We just review this one-on-one in the individual cases and say that yes, I can bump it up by so and so, or hey, no, your performance have to move for a little bit more to get more compensation is something, a conversation that we have. But these two conversation happens at least with a gap of 30 days, Yash. So no recency bias and everything. The compensation is driven by, there is a strong recommendation comes from the HR. Hey, this is the compensation range within which that you can do. And also every team and manager has a budget within which they can really allocate that based on what they feel as important person and I want to reward them. We also give the managers a flexibility with the range. This is how we try to manage the compensation. Of course, it's not 100% perfect and not everybody gets happy, but we do have pushback from the team individuals, but we manage it case by case. Yes.
Awesome. So we are just about coming to close time. Maybe I'll ask Lavanya the last question and we open it up for Q&A. I see there is one question also on the chat system. So like just an ending thought, Lavanya, right? Like if an organization was starting today on designing their performance system, like what are the common things to look out for? And like what would you recommend?
I would say just to try and understand what sort of an organization you want to build and what are you really looking for in your people, right? What is that thing that needs to be in your DNA? Like if you look at Chargebee, I think you must have heard it so many times already, right? Like that hunger to learn and grow is something that you can see is what we look for. And that is probably an identifiable trait that you can notice. So what is it that what are the kind of people that you want with what traits, right? And write it down. And also, I think keep your performance management simple. Start with articulating why you're doing this, and just share the why with the team. Let us say it's 10 members, right? You want to tell them how well they're doing. Maybe it's a framework of 2-3 questions, right? These are your strengths. You're really good at this. Here's some areas where I think you can do even better, and just keep it simple, and then keep iterating. As you scale, you'll hit points where you'll know there's some gap starting to creep up. At that point, I think talk to people who've scaled a little beyond that. Try and understand how their journey's been, and just iterate. I think keeping it simple and writing it down and talking to people is probably what I would suggest.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Lavanya. And I think thanks again, Rajaraman. This was pretty insightful for us. We have maybe 3-4 minutes here left with us, and we'd probably love to use that for questions. We have in fact, a couple of questions here. One was, how do you train managers to deliver feedback? And the second one was like based on the ratings, and we spoke a bit about that. Is there a bell curve which you follow on the ratings per se? So these are the two questions which we have on the chat.
Yeah, I can take the stab at it. So I'll just address the simplest one. Is there a bell curve? No, we don't really have a bell curve that we enforce in Chargebee. But we've also find ourselves in an uncomfortable situation where there are too many exceptions and everything. We go and challenge those exception ratings in Y and everything. So are people not able to give an appropriate one and take an easy way out? Managers, those are the questions that we have with the people. But there is no bell curve yet. I don't know. We personally don't believe in the bell curve, but we need to see as we scale through our own journey and how it evolves in the next 1 or 2 years. So we'll keep it that way. And in terms of how do you train the manager to deliver feedback, I'll just go back to what Lavanya mentioned. First, showing to those managers by writing it down is an important exercise that organization has to go through from the top, right? If the leaders don't show the managers how to write it down as a feedback, I don't think the managers has an ability to learn. That's also the coaching methodology And once you give that and writing, and you have the right to demand the same thing from the manager to do it for their one-on-one, for their team members, is extremely important. But as you go through the scale, second one is when you have a closer to performance review process running on office hours to help managers with the tactical questions and everything. So we started running on a lot of office hours leading up to the final date of performance, closing the performance review conversation, having the managers come to the team to do the HR team can actually walk them through some of the samples written down and how they could actually use the framework and write it down. And finally, when you get to a certain scale, rolling out a proper manager program to focus only on effectively giving feedback. We have done all these three over a period of time. These are the things that we could do, but to start with, it comes from easiest way is showing people, giving them the direct feedback written down, and then running office hours as the shortest way to get the managers to have certain grasp in delivering the feedback in a better way.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rajaraman. I think that was a great answer. And if we have any more questions from the audience, maybe we can take one more before we wrap up. We'll just wait for like a minute or so and see if there are more questions. In the meantime, for the audience, we again, just to repeat, this session was from this community called the Talent Tribe, where we are trying to reconstruct talent management and the best practices. If you are interested in checking out more, you could visit community.talenttribe.com. It should also be in your Zoom invitations. Where I look forward to actively basically discussing and taking this discussion forward in the community with all of us here. Okay, so no more questions, I believe. So I think that's time to close. Again, thanks a lot, Rajaraman and Lavanya, for your time. It was really insightful for all of us. And thanks a lot to the audience for taking out 1 hour of your time to come here and kind of interact with us here. We'll look forward to more such interactions in the future. We'll probably close right now.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.